Thank you for asking me to come along today to speak. I'm going to split today's session, just so you get a bit of a break from my voice, into sort of a bit about our story and what we've been up to in York, and then to break, have some questions, talk about that, and then go into a little bit more detail about how we've delivered what we're trying to do, and some of our thinking around our structure as a community land trust, and a little bit about our sort of future plans and where we see YorSpace going. So I have been late, so I don't know how much of an intro Catherine's given me, but I'll give you a very brief one of me now. So my name's James Newton, and I'm a co-founder of YorSpace, and we set the project up back in 2014 officially, but really we were thinking about it in sort of 2013. So yeah, I'm a director of YorSpace, but I'm also a future resident in the first development, which I'll come on to talk about shortly. So yeah, I'm sure there's been done some housekeeping, but in terms of questions, please jot them down in the chat box, and I'll answer what I can at the midway point, and then follow that up with any kind of potential questions at the end too. So yeah, so I'll sort of kick things off where we started. So YorSpace as a community land trust, that's something that kind of evolved later. Initially, YorSpace came together, two friends came around the idea of creating a co-housing community, and we were hugely inspired by this project in Leeds, Lilac. And for me personally, for someone with a background in architecture and really passionate about living sustainably, Lilac represented a really interesting concept here, which is you could live sustainably as part of on a neighborhood level, tackle climate change on a neighborhood level, but also that it was accessible to people on lower incomes. And it kind of sparked a thought up in my head that it was sort of, you watch grand designs and you see people with lots of money build these really fancy homes, and you think, not a chance can I live in a sustainable home like that. So Lilac was really, really inspiring, and their ownership model and the way that they ensured affordability is something that really struck a chord with our initial members. And affordability for us was quite important, but primarily the important thing that I picked up on was sustainability. So this is a piece of street art from Denmark called the Housing Market Forecast. And this is the housing market forecast environmentally. We're really, really inefficient at using our resources. And so when I looked at Lilac and saw that they were building 20 straw bale homes, I was thinking, this is brilliant. This is the answer. Community-led housing can help us deliver that. So we're really committed to being sustainable as a project, and we want to fight against this image of us wasting resources. And so that's one of our key aims as an organisation that was inspired by Lilac. I mentioned affordability. So York is a particularly expensive place to live. I apologise for people living further down south that have a much more robust argument for that, for their projects in their region, but regionally York is a very expensive place to live, comparatively speaking. And at the time we were forming as a group, there were claims about York being the most expensive city in the north, and us quite naively saw what Lilac had done and thought, oh well, we'll just find a plot of land in York and we'll build our own homes, and that'll just be really, really easy, and that'll be really so. And it isn't the case, and so. We started. That's how we became public with our project, because we started challenging the council locally and trying to think about how we could make things more affordable. Really, what we're talking about there is the housing crisis, and lots of community-led housing groups come up around the idea of the housing crisis. And particularly in York, the sort of the rising cost in house values. Locally in York, the average house price rose by 300% in a 20-year period, and no one's salary went like that. And so, unless you were on the ladder, you really struggled to get onto it. And so, the rising cost in house values, rent and living costs as well, just means that your ability to save for a deposit started to diminish. And the buy-to-let market is kind of booming in York, and so you kind of get stuck in this sort of Bermuda Triangle where you can't really find a way into the model. So that was something that we were sort of, well, how can we look at what Lilac have done, and how can we do something similar in York, where it seems to be more acute affordability. And the final sort of aim of us, so we have three aims that we come around: the idea of sustainability, affordability, but finally the one that really sticks to us is community. I think lots of people care about these issues, and we've found over the time that we've been doing this that lots of people want to come together, eat tea, drink cake, sorry, hang on, drink tea, eat cake, and share food and talk about these things. And we, over the course of the time that we've done this, we've built a community around this. So we come together, we share about our issues, the experience that we have with affordability and sustainability, and come together and talk about it. And that's been at the heartbeat of what we've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years now. And when we get together, when we talk about these ideas, we go out. And so I mentioned us going public with the issues around affordability. We went out as a group and started to ask people in York, are you affected by this? What is it can we do to counteract this? And so we do a lot of community engagement as an organisation. We have done for many years. So we've gone out and we've shared plans. We've taken people to the sites that we've been looking at. We've done radio, we've done the press, we've been very, very vocal, and we've been very clear that the answer to this necessarily doesn't lie with the council, but with communities coming together to tackle these issues. So we've really got behind that idea, and that's what we've pushed forward as an organisation. In 2015, we very publicly, but very politely, told the council off for what they were doing with a building in York. And we ran a campaign to purchase a building off the council to convert that into 14 affordable units. We were going to retain the building. We were going to retrofit it. It made no environmental sense to knock that building down. We were looking at this mutual home ownership model, which I'll come on to talk about later, so that the homes don't just stay affordable for the first generation, but they stay for the next generation. And this building came up for sale, and we were encouraged by the local community, who didn't want it to see it disappear off into another private ownership, wanted to do this idea of a community buyout. And so we went to the council and put a bid in, and we campaigned for this. And what it did was a real good platform for us to say to the council that if you're going to sell off your assets to the highest bidder, you're only exacerbating the problem. And so we ran a really good campaign, and unfortunately, well, at the end of the day, we bid £750,000 for this building, and someone bid 3.25 million. So we're completely blown out of the water, and you can't blame the council for the decision that they made. But ultimately, we felt like that was a bad sign, that despite all the public support we generated, that the council hadn't listened, and even though we got some people supported, it wasn't really happening for us. But to be fair to the council, they have listened to us, and since sort of 2016, we've been looking at this site, which is the first development that YorSpace are working on, which is at Lowfield Green, and it's part of a wider council-led development. And we've been really encouraged by the council's engagement with us and our ability to be able to communicate our message and to have this opportunity. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see with the big orange arrow, we're looking at a small corner of this 165 home development. So we're looking to build 19 homes on this site. And the critical thing here was that the council didn't sell this land on the open market. They prioritised it for us. With the experience that we had with Oliver House and this idea that the council should be prioritising community value over capital value, it meant that because of our ownership model, because the way we were building we were basically a community self-build, the council found a way to actually reserve this site for the social value that we were presenting, so we didn't have to bid on the open market. And that is the only reason we're hitting our affordability targets for this particular project, because of the land value that the council sold us that, selling us that land at. So these are some nice visuals for the project. So we've gone through a long process. I showed you some images earlier of residents coming together and having workshops and speaking to the architects and speaking to the building services engineers, the landscape architects, all those creative consultants that we work with. And this was our vision for Lowfield Green. So we're building 19 homes. It's a mixture of 1 and 2 bed flats, 2, 3 and 4 bed homes. It's a classic common house setup. A co-housing setup in the fact that we have a common house, we have communal facilities. All the homes are designed around One Planet Living principles, which is a sustainability framework that City of York Council are following. So we really chimed with their local aims. And yeah, so these are our plans. We got planning permission in March 2019, just to pick out some of the features. So I mentioned One Planet Living principles. We've got 19 homes. We've only got 12 car parking spaces, which as a future resident is going to be really interesting to see how that pans out. But that really, for us, set our stall out in terms of our commitment to sustainability. All the homes are going to be built from low carbon bio-based construction materials to really high performance standards. with renewable energy powering them. We've got a nice car-free shared space. I mentioned the number of car parking spaces. We've designed it so that cars don't interfere with the central space, that we've got space for kids to be able to run around and not worry about them coming into contact with traffic. We're thinking about sustainable water. We've got food growing spaces in there. We're yeah, lots of really, really interesting, exciting things that we're excited to bring to this site. And this is another view. So I mentioned our common house. This is going to be our sort of our community hub. The common house is primarily for the residents, but we are talking about opening that space out to other people in the city to make it a community hub. Also for other people who want to do something similar in York to come and help us, to come and learn from us, and for us to be able to share our experiences and give them a space to have a meeting, which is a really, really valuable thing for community groups. So affordability, are the homes we're building affordable? When you compare them to the local market, absolutely. Our actual house values are about 60 to 70% of the local market. Our monthly repayments are at the maximum 80% when you compare it to the local mortgage rates. We're really, really excited. And again, I mentioned it, the affordability that was locked in from the outset with the council selling us this land at a lower value. One of the ways that we make the homes affordable is looking at different financing options. One of the things that we ran last year, which we were really proud of, was we issued shares in YorSpace. I'll come on to talk about our structure a little bit more, but we are a community land trust and we're a community benefit society, which meant that YorSpace could sell shares in its society, and we did that to help fund the purchase of the site. And I mentioned earlier, one of the issues around access to housing is that is the deposit. Lots of people could actually probably pay the monthly repayments. It's just the deposit that they struggle with. So we came around this idea of the community bank of mum and dad, helping for us to keep those deposits low so that people could access housing at a lower value. So we ran that campaign from the back end of 2019, just before everything went crazy in March last year. We finished in sort of end of January, and our target was 365,000, and we actually generated 422,000 pounds worth of investment, and we were just blown away by the support. And there's just some stats there on the types of people that invested and how many people did invest. So yeah, that was really, really exciting to again get that affirmation that people buy into what we're trying to do, and it helped us keep our levels down in terms of cost. So funding. So I mentioned the mix of funding that we've done to deliver the project. So our community shares, our target, our maximum raise was 475,000. We didn't quite reach that, but we weren't too far away. We've been very successful in getting lots of grant funding into the project for revenue. So the 302,000 you see, that's actually slightly higher. Actually, YorSpace is generated in paying for things like I mentioned, the architects, the plans, the development, the business plans for a share offer, all those types of things. And so that's been successful. We've also created the co-op that's going to own the homes, and I'll come on again to talk about that a little bit later. One of the key components of this project to make it affordable is that the co-op can access £855,000 worth of grant. That is an issue for us at the minute. We can't find that money. The community housing fund not being extended has been a big barrier to us getting on site. We're ready to go now. So yeah, so that's a key component in our funding. And then the resident deposits that I talked about. So this sort of spreadsheet, or this table, sorry, hopefully communicates the sort of split of costs between YorSpace, the CLT, and the co-op, and how we're funding that. We were also successful with our share offer. We actually generated £100,000 worth of match investment, which was amazing, really amazing. Again, some more affirmation that people believe in what we're trying to do. So I mentioned the £855,000. That is a big hole that we have in our budget at the moment. And we were supposed to start on site last year, and we weren't able to, unfortunately. So the joys of COVID is that now you have to stand 2 meters apart. So when you do a site visit, you end up doing this flash mob type setup, which was very exciting. So this was us on site in October last year. We're ready to go now. We feel that we've really been shortchanged in terms of the council not following through with their commitment to deliver the community housing fund. because our ownership model, which again I'll come on to talk a little bit more, isn't a recognised funding ownership model by the central government. So we are in the situation where we haven't got that that grant available to us at the moment. So yeah, so I'm sure people will talk to you about this a lot, about the extension of the community housing fund. It's really, really important for this project to succeed. The reason that it is important is that, you know, the government put that funding up, and hats off to them. It's generated that pipeline of projects that you can see. 23,000 homes in the pipeline is way above any expectations, and that's a huge slap on the back for everyone in this sector. The only problem with it is that the great thing about it was that it was going to drive innovation. It was going to fund this ownership model, the mutual home ownership model, which meant that we could meet the affordability targets we've got. Now, unfortunately, we can't access that grant through the main fund. So this is part of our story again here, about us trying to convince the government to extend that fund. We're still yet to hear on that, but we do have other irons in the fire, and we're hopeful we can get some support from the local government to plug that gap. So if you haven't already, please do write to your local MP. This is YorSpace's version of community-led development, is how I would say. So I've mentioned the council already in this. We as an organisation, as a community benefit society and a CLT, are essentially a community business that is looking to find sites in the city, purchase them, hold them in perpetuity as a community asset, and then help as a conduit to bring all these different people together. So some of those pictures I showed earlier, we had local volunteers, we've got future residents, people like myself, or the other members of the Lowfield Green Housing Co-op who put a huge amount of time in to generate all these ideas, apply for the grant funding, and then bring in that grant funding. And also I mentioned the community share offer. We've generated local investment into the project too. So YorSpace is kind of like the lead overarching community land trust. And our model involves us, once we bought that land, is leasing it to co-ops. And the reason we've structured it that way is because over the time that we've been doing this, so it's frightening how long we've been trying to do this now. So 7 years is probably how long we've been doing it. We've learned a huge amount. And our view is that what happens when someone like myself or Sue, my co-founder, comes along now and says, I want to do this, well, they're going to have to start from scratch, unless there was somebody who had this sort of track record. And so that's the idea of YorSpace. We're trying to be that to try and hopefully make it happen faster than 7 years, and to give people like the council and other landowners the confidence that this thing is worth doing. So yeah, YorSpace leases the land to the co-op, and then the co-op then has an ownership model, which I'll come on to talk about. That ensures that residents can accrue equity, as you would do in a normal home, but that you can't speculate on the value of that equity. So the homes that we're building will never find their way onto the open market. And we have this two-tiered structure. So YorSpace is a CLT with its asset lock and it being a community business holds the land, and then the lease arrangement into a cooperative mutual home ownership society means that the residents of that home collectively own their homes. And this hopefully goes away towards moving away from this issue around house prices. If we can try and deflate house prices in the city, it means the houses will be more accessible for people in the future, especially people on lower incomes and younger people. So mutual home ownership, you might have heard about this before. Lilac pioneered this in 2013. This is YorSpace's version of mutual home ownership, in the sense that, so I mentioned when you become a resident. So I've applied and I've been accepted as a resident at Lowfield Green. When I move in, I will become a member of Lowfield Green Housing Co-op, or the Mutual Home Ownership Society, and that co-op, the co-op that we're members of, will own the homes. I don't directly own my own home, but I collectively have a stake and equity that I build up in the society. When I move into the development, or just before I move in, it'd be weird if I moved in and then paid, but I will pay my deposit, which is 10% of the value of the home. So we talked about before about the value of the homes. We're about 60 to 70% of the local market. The average UK deposit at the minute is 15 to 85% loan to ratio. So you need a 15% deposit basically. So we try to keep our deposits as low as possible and the house prices as low as possible. So we pay that 10% deposit, or we can pay more, but the minimum is 10%. And our monthly repayments. And over time, there's an amount of money that goes off to pay the bank that we're borrowing the money from, the investors. So there's agreement between the co-op and YorSpace, and there's some money that goes to YorSpace to pay off our investors because we've offered people a return on investment. And then a proportion of what we pay becomes equity. So that's how you own a share in the co-op. And over time, depending on how much you paid, your equity grows as you pay more and more in. When you leave, the new resident comes in, and just before they come in, the co-op would assess how much you paid in over time. It would make any adjustments to any percentage increase. So I mentioned about our house values not being linked to the local market. Our house values are linked to 2.5% rise every year, year on year, which is roughly inflation. But a most recent bit of research we did on this is that over a 20-year period between 2000 and 2020, the average house price in York went up 98%. With our model looking at this over the next 20 years, our house values are going to go up 48%. So if it does continue the same trajectory, our homes become incredibly affordable. So yeah, so what it means is that the resident that comes in, they have their deposit and they pay that, but the person that's left, the co-op pays them out and they leave. There's no selling on the open market, and then the co-op refinances after it's paid back the leaving resident, the parting resident, and then that new resident pays their deposit and starts making their monthly repayments. I'm really happy to answer any more questions on that because MHOS is a bit mind-boggling, but that's the simplest way I can think of presenting it.